The River Dee starts here at Bala Lake. This is the largest lake in Wales and is situated in the central part of the Principality. Today we're going to look at features in the Dee Valley and its extension westwards. I'm standing in the village of Llyn, which is at the southwest end of Bala Lake, or Llyn Tegid as the Welsh call it. And up the side of Bala Lake runs this narrow gauge railway from Llyn to Llangower. Now, this used, in fact, to be part of the main line that ran from Wrexham through Llangollen, Corwen, Bala, down to Dolgellau, Barmouth, and the West Welsh coast. You can see, in fact, that it goes in a fairly straight line. And if you look behind me, you'll see that it's aiming for a pass in the hills. The hollow, right there. You follow that long slope of the mountains down, 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 and the railway used to go down that pass. So, as a matter of fact, does the modern road. And they go that way because this railway, the road, and Bala Lake all follow the line of a big structural fault called the Bala Fault, which runs southwest to the northeast, where all the rocks were crushed and torn, making a belt of weakness through which the rivers could go, and the road, and the railway. Bala is just about halfway between the western end of the fault valley at Tywyn and the Welsh border. The fault line effectively cuts right across central Wales. Although it might appear from the map that the fault line extends as far as Dolgellau, in fact it swings sharply to the southwest to the valley holding Lake Llyn. Here, rocks were violently moved sideways for a distance of over 2 kilometres, as well as upwards and downwards on either side of the fault line. Today, the valley is known for its lake, Llyn. Llyn is a long, shallow ribbon lake which was produced by a landslide which dammed the river. Rising from its northern banks are the slopes which eventually reach to the summit of Cadair Idris. Cadair Idris is one of the southern peaks of the Snowdonia National Park, and we shall be in this national park until we reach Bala. The structural valley continues northeastwards from the Llyn fault through this deep valley until it meets the line of the Union River, which follows the fault line further east to Lake Bala. The railway we saw at the beginning of the programme runs along the south side of the lake. If we travel on this railway from Llyn to Llangower, we can get a good view of Bala Lake. This lake is of glacial origin. It was excavated by a valley glacier which passed northeastwards along the Dee Valley. The lake is 6 kilometres long and just over 1 kilometre wide. Although 38 metres at its deepest, for much of its extent, it's a shallow lake. From the air, we can see that the lake is slowly being reduced in size. You can see that fan or delta encroaching on the lakeside. This and other deposits are laid down by streams entering the lake. Out of the eastern end of the lake, south of the town of Bala, pours the Dee. The flow's been restricted here in an attempt to control flooding on the valley floor downstream in the direction of Corwen. A few kilometres south of Corwen, the Dee is joined by a sizable tributary, the Olwen, which enters on the northern bank. Here at Corwen, we can see that the river is wide, slow-moving, and flowing in a deep valley. When a river cuts its way down, the valley it forms is usually V-shaped. But as you can see, the valley of the Dee hereabouts isn't V-shaped at all. It's a wide, flat U-shape. And that's because this valley has been widened and rounded out by the action of glaciers during the Ice Age. There's another interesting point about this location, which is not far from Corwen, midway between Llangollen and Corwen. There's proof here that the easiest way through the hills is the way the river took. There's a road on either side of the river, and here we've got the line that the railway builders took. All right, the railway line has fallen into disuse and has been taken up now, but the railway builders knew that the easiest way through the hills is follow the river. The stretch of river from Corwen to Llangollen, a distance of only 14 kilometres, is particularly interesting for the river meanders. The word meander simply means a bend in the river. The area of land limited by the width of the meanders in a valley is called a meander belt. The meanders are formed by erosion and deposition by the river. If we look carefully at the banks of the river, we see the evidence of erosion and deposition. This deposit, jutting out into the river, has been built up partially by materials eroded from the bank here in the foreground and from materials from the opposite bank. Materials are also carried down from places upstream. These are common features developed in rivers. At various times in the life of the river, over thousands of years, the river will for long periods erode more deeply than at other times. The river may also change its course within the existing valley. Evidence of these former courses can be seen here on the Dee in lines of terraces. You can see them there, those small breaks of slope on the otherwise flat valley floor. The valley and the meandering river from Corwen to Glyndefrdwy, about halfway between Corwen and Llangollen, change character as we move eastwards. The wide U-shaped valley to the west suddenly narrows and becomes a deep, flat-bottomed gorge. But this gorge is complicated. Here, looking eastwards in the direction of Llangollen, we see the main valley features, steep sides and a flat valley floor. Well, as you've seen, the river hereabouts is meandering quite a lot, and in fact, I'm standing in one of its meanders. But there isn't any river here. Where's it gone? Well, as a matter of fact, it's cut its way through the base of the meander over there, instead of running, as it used to do, along this valley and round that mountain over there. And how did that come about? Well, nobody really knows. There are three suggestions. The first is that a long time ago, the level of the sea fell, which made the river cut its way, ran faster, it cut its way down through the base of the meander. The second alternative is that the land rose, much the same sort of effect, the river cutting its way through the base of the meander. But neither of those two explanations really work, because the obvious question is, why here? Why not further up the river? And the third suggestion is that during the earth movements that threw up a lot of the mountains around here, a lot of the rocks at the base of the meander were shattered, and the river found it easier to worm its way through those than to come round this way. The dry meander we've been looking at, that shaded area just west of Llangollen, isn't the only one in this short stretch of the river. The feature is repeated most noticeably here, a short distance away. There are, in fact, other much more complicated theories to explain these features in addition to the three that we have discussed. But whatever the reasons for their formation, they remain striking features. While our attention has been focused on the river, its banks, its valley and the hillsides, we've been able to appreciate the rural beauty of this stretch of virtually unspoiled countryside. Only the A5 is a reminder of the bustling economic world as traffic passes through this area. Many tourists and travellers come this way without realising that only a short distance away, within 2 kilometres of the A5, is one of the most magnificent limestone escarpments in Britain. This is the Egluiseg escarpment. It stretches in a great arc, some 6.4 kilometres in length, from Trevor Rocks in the southeast to the strangely named plateau called World's End in the north. On the upper parts of the scarp, we can see the variations in the hardness and resistance of the various rock beds to weathering and erosion. The face has several clear steps, beneath which are those more gently sloping screes. From the top of the escarpment to the base is a height of 137 metres. At first sight, it might appear a challenging climb, but there are at least 2 very good reasons for not attempting it. Firstly, limestone is a treacherous rock, especially when wet, because then the surfaces are extremely slippery and unstable. Secondly, although there appears to be very little plant cover here, the plants which do grow are of special interest to botanists. The ledges and steps provide a protected environment for hardy plants. Streams have cut through the escarpment, breaking it into a series of rounded promontories. At the foot of the screes, the rock changes and the lowland valley, followed by a twisting road, has been formed on Silurian rocks. Castel Dinas Bran, a ruin surmounting a steep, isolated hill, provides an excellent vantage point for viewing the southern face of the escarpment and the nearby Dee Valley. From here, we can look down on Llangollen, the town commanding this length of the Dee. The site and form of this small town has been strongly influenced by the surrounding relief. To the west is the Dee Gorge, and to the east a much wider open valley. The rocky channel of the Dee has been bridged here. Although the site of an ancient Roman-British settlement, the bridge, one of the oldest structures in the town, dates from the 14th century. At this bridge terminated the double-track railway from Rhuaben, now closed. From Llangollen westwards to Dolgelly, this line was single-track. The railway was opened in the 1860s when Llangollen was famed as a textile manufacturing town. Welsh flannel was the town's major speciality, and until the 1940s there were 3 mills working here. The last mill was closed in 1960. Today, Llangollen is known to motorists passing along the busy A5 and to owners of small boats using the canal. It has a growing worldwide reputation as the home of the annual International Musical Eisteddfod. This Eisteddfod was started here in 1947, and since then, thousands of competitors from all parts of the world have taken part in dancing, singing, and other forms of musical competition. The town stands on a congested site between the steep valley sides of the Dee. The layout of roads, railway, canal and the river is especially striking here. We've already referred to the opening of the railway here in the 1860s. This canal was opened earlier in the 19th century. It couldn't reach the town until the Dee had been spanned further east. This was achieved in 1805 when the Pont Cysylltu aqueduct was opened. It took 10 years to build, and it was the brainchild of the famous engineer Thomas Telford. It's 302 metres long and 38 metres high. Some of the building materials incorporated into this structure sound odd to us today. The joints are filled with Welsh flannel and lead dipped in boiling sugar, and the mortar is made from ox blood, lime and water. Today, the aqueduct stands as a monument to engineering skill, and instead of carrying the industrial barge traffic for which it was designed, it's now a tourist attraction, and it carries the cruisers and canoes of the increasing numbers of holidaymakers who take part in water leisure activities. East of this aqueduct, the Dee Valley widens to become part of the lowlands of the Cheshire Plain. We have seen how the river valley of the Dee is part of a complicated structural valley following the line of the Talyllyn-Bala fault. The valley varies in its depth, width and line. It's been influenced by the work of rivers as well as by glaciers. The Dee is particularly interesting physically for its meanders. The impact of this relief upon communications is particularly noticeable, and at Llangollen we can see the valley routes of road, railway and canal. The channeling of routeways in an east-west direction has been one of the human results of the major fault line. In a small nation like Wales, it's interesting to conjecture how much this has influenced the communal life of the Welsh people.